Namaskar. We will be beginning our 8th module on consumer behavior today. This is the last and final module in this particular course, and this module is titled Diffusion of Innovation. In this particular module, we will be talking about innovation, the definition and meaning of diffusion of innovation and adoption. We shall be discussing the diffusion process, the adoption process, the various factors affecting the diffusion of innovation process and the adoption process. We will be talking in terms of the triggers and the barriers to the diffusion process or to the adoption process. We will be discussing the profile of an innovator, and finally we will be rounding it up with discussing the relevance of diffusion of innovation and adoption for a marketer. This particular module shall be covered in a total of 2 hours, and in the first hour we shall be discussing innovation, the definition and meaning of diffusion of innovation and adoption, the diffusion process and the adoption process. So, let us begin with our discussion on innovation. Now, in this highly complex market environment that we face ourselves in, it is very important that we are always on the move. We are always trying to go research or trying to develop into new product and service offerings. This is very important for 2 reasons. One, there are changing needs and wants, priorities, preferences, and evolving needs and wants, priorities, preferences, which we see in the marketplace, which we see amongst consumers in the marketplace on a day-to-day behavior. So, in our social system, as we see changes, these get translated into changing needs, wants, priorities, preferences. We see a change in terms of evolution of needs and wants and different ways in which consumers would want their needs and wants to be satisfied. So, a marketer has to be always on the move, trying to come up with newer product and service offerings that will help a consumer meet his needs and wants in a better way. The second reason why it is important and crucial for a marketer to be awake all the time and try and develop new product and service offerings is because competition is increasing at a very fast pace today. So, if a particular person or a particular marketer or a firm is not active in its approach, it is not proactive in its approach to develop new products and service offerings which will meet the needs and wants of the customer in a better manner, there will be another competitor who may do so very quickly, and he will just take over. So, in order to fight the competition, in order to gain a competitive edge, in order to survive in the market, succeed in the market, and have a good standing, good position in the market as well as in the hearts and minds of the consumer, it is very important that you come up with newer products, newer service offerings which will meet the consumer needs in a better manner. So, as we see, the marketer has to be always on the move for introduction of new product and service offerings that will meet the evolving needs and wants of the customer segments. Now, whatever products and services are offered, the new product and services that can be offered can be put in a continuum. They can either be slight modifications to existing product or services, or maybe little bigger modifications or some stronger, higher modifications, or they could be totally radically different and in the form of a new product or service offering. So, if you put it on a scale or on a continuum, it could be slightly different or marginally different or substantially different or radically different or totally new. So, any of these whatever form of change comes about or whatever form of newness that comes about basically falls into the purview of what we call as an innovation, and the product and services are referred to as the innovative product or services. Now, wherever they fall on a continuum, be it a marginal change or a substantial change or a radical change, be it a slight modification or a new product in entirety, it would involve a change in one and all of the 4 Ps. It could be a change in the product where the basic form of the product may change, the features may change, the attributes may change, the packaging may change, the benefits may change, or even the brand name may change. There could be a change in terms of the second P, which is price, where changes may be brought about in the price or in the terms of payments or in the method of payment, either as cash down or as installment. It could be a change that is brought about in the distribution process or in the place, the third P, which is place. So, it could be a change which is being brought from the physical traditional brick and mortar store versus to a more modern the electronic format, or it could be also in the form of personal selling, or there could be a change in the promotion strategy of the company in terms of the media strategy or the message strategy or any of these. So whatever a change a product may have, either as a marginal change or as a radical change or as a new product in entirety, it would involve a change in the marketing mix, it would involve a change in the 4 P's. So it's now when a marketer comes up with such new changes, when he comes up with such new products, it's very important for him to judge or to guess the impact or the reaction that would be brought about by the customer segment. Will they accept the product, or will they not accept the product? Would they adopt the product very quickly, or would they take some time before the adoption process takes place? So what would be customer reaction to this particular new product, to this innovative offering? This is something which it's very important that a marketer should be able to understand this. He should be able to understand consumer reaction to a new product or service. He should be able to understand how the customer will react or how he will respond to this change that is being brought about in the product itself. So it's essential that a marketer understands 2 things: 1, the innovation and the diffusion of the innovation, and 2, the adoption or the rate of adoption of this new product or service offering. Now we shall be dealing with both innovation, diffusion of innovation and adoption process subsequently, but let us first come to the very definition of the word innovation. What is an innovation? Now the term innovation has been variedly defined. It has been defined, it has been described with varying orientations and varying perspectives. We have a firm oriented definition, we have a product oriented definition, we have market oriented definitions, and we have consumer oriented definitions. So let us discuss each of these orientations to defining the term innovation. Now, if we talk of a firm-oriented definition of innovation, product is regarded as innovative if it is either manufactured or marketed by a firm for the first time. So it is newness in terms from the perspective of the marketer or from the perspective of the manufacturer. Okay, so according to this firm-oriented approach, a product or service offering is regarded as a new product or service when it is manufactured or sold or marketed by a company or by an organization for the first time. So we define newness from a firm's perspective, irrespective of whether such products already exist in the market, or irrespective of the fact that a competitor has similar product or service offerings. We just ignore all these things. We ignore the existence of competitors, we ignore the existence of such products in the market. We just confine ourselves to defining innovation from a firm point of view, from newness in terms of the firm's orientation. So a product will be regarded new as long as it is manufactured or sold by a firm or by a marketer for the first time. Now it is new to the company, so it is a new product. So that is what the premise is. As long as it is new to the company, it will be regarded as an innovative product. Now the second orientation of defining a product defining an innovative product is a product oriented definition. In the product oriented definition, a product or service is regarded as an innovation, it is regarded as new if there is a change brought about in the product, either in terms of attributes or in terms of characteristics or in terms of features or in terms of overall benefits. Now such changes have a twofold connotation: one in terms of the technology used to produce them, and two in terms of the behavioral change that will be brought about in the usage of such product and service offerings. So one is technology used to manufacture or produce them. Two is in terms of behavioral changes that will be brought about in the consumers or in the marketplace so as to be able to use this kind of a product. So in terms of consumption usage and in terms of consumption patterns or behavioral patterns, there will be a change. So there are two changes: one technological and related to the product, and two behavioral and related to the consumption behavior or to the consumption process. So the product is innovative if one, it brings about a change in the product offering, in its form, in its features, in its attributes and its benefits, and two, there are changes in technology and there are changes brought about in the consumption behavior or in the consumption pattern or in the very usage of such product or service offerings. Now there are two sub approaches to defining or to classify innovative products as per the product oriented definition. We have approach 1, where a particular product is defined as new based on the degree to which it would upset established usage and behavioral patterns. Okay. So, on the basis of how and with what magnitude or with what intensity it will upset established consumer usage and behavioral patterns will determine the newness of a product. So, it classifies innovative products on the basis of the degree to which such a new product or service offering would disrupt or would upset the established consumer usage and behavioral patterns. Now, according to this approach, we classify new products into three categories. One, continuous innovations; two, dynamically continuous innovations; and three, discontinuous innovations. Now, what is a continuous innovation? A product is regarded as a continuous innovation if it is a modification over an existing product. So, it is not essentially a new product, but it is just an improvement over already existing products. This could be in the form of line extensions, and such continuous innovations will not bring about any change in the behavioral patterns or any change in the consumer usage and behavioral patterns. So, there is just a change brought about in the product only and in the form of a line extension, which is not going to bring about any change in the usage patterns amongst the consumers. For example, improvements brought about in the laser jet printers or digital TVs or shaving razors, or even changes in call plans, Airtel and Cell One call plans. So, these are changes which are brought about in the product, but they are not necessarily going to bring about any change in the usage patterns or in the behavioral patterns. So, we call such innovations as continuous innovations. There is another kind of innovations which we refer to as dynamically continuous innovations. Dynamically continuous innovations means there is a change which comes about in the product, but there is also some influence on the usage and consumption patterns. But this influence is not totally disruptive, it is not totally radical, it is not totally disruptive, and it is not going to upset the behavioral pattern in entirety. So, there is some change in the consumption behavior and in the usage pattern, but this is something which is not totally disruptive. So, it does not bring about a total change in the behavioral pattern or the consumption pattern. For example, the Walkman giving way to the CD, the portable CD player. So, the Walkman here is something which was portable sound, and this CD player is also the portable CD player is also a portable sound. There is hardly any change in the behavioral pattern, except that technologically if the product has changed. So, change has been brought about in the product, and there is very little change in the behavioral pattern. Only thing is probably he can store more music, or he can so this is what we mean by a dynamically continuous innovation. Similarly, pagers giving way to cell phones is again a kind of a dynamically continuous innovation. Now, there is another category which we refer to as discontinuous innovation, which leads to totally disruptive change, total disruption in the usage and consumption patterns of consumers. So, there is a total change in the usage pattern, there is a total change in the consumption pattern and consumption behavior of consumers. So, there is a change not only in the technology, but there is also a big change with respect to the usage of the product. It requires new behavioral patterns to be adopted by the consumer for usage of such product or service offerings. So, it requires consumers to change into new behavioral patterns in terms of usage, in terms of consumption. For example, the postal mail giving way to the internet or to the email, or the traditional record player or the radio giving way to portable sound systems, the telephone giving way to the mobile, or the traditional the glucose and diabetes blood test giving way to the simple home kits which are used. So, there is a change in the technology, there is also a big change which in the behavior, which requires customers to bring about a change in bring about a change in terms of consumption usage, in terms of behavioral patterns for usage and consumption. So, this is one approach about how we define innovation, which was in terms of behavioral changes to be brought about or disruption of existing behavioral patterns and consumption usage. Now, there is another approach to defining or classifying the product oriented definition of innovation. There is another approach how we can classify new products as per the product oriented definition of innovations. Innovative products can be classified on the basis of how the newness in the form, in the features or the attributes can impact customer satisfaction. So, the greater the satisfaction, the higher it ranks in terms of innovativeness. So, in this sense, products can be artificially new, they can be marginally new, or they can be genuinely new. So, it is in terms of the overall benefits that a consumer gets, that he derives. If the benefit is large, it leads to higher satisfaction. So, the product is new, it is considered to be higher on the scale of innovativeness. Now, what is an artificially new innovation? An artificially new innovation does not embody much change, and so it does not impact consumer satisfaction in a major way. So, it does not embody any, much of change. It does not bring about any change in customer satisfaction, and it's just very, it's termed as artificially new. So, a new flavor of an ice cream, for example, can be, artificially new, form of innovation. Another is marginally new, when there is some change brought about in the product, there is some change brought about in customer satisfaction, because the new product is different or differs little over the existing products and gives more benefits, it gives more satisfaction. So, the level of satisfaction is higher compared to the artificially new products. So, laser printer substituting the dot max printer is an example of a marginally new product. And then you have genuinely new, which means absolutely new features, new attributes, greater benefits, greater satisfaction, and it differs entirely from existing product or service offerings and leads to greater customer satisfaction, gives greater benefit. So, for example, you have products like cell phones, you have products like microwaves, or you have home medical kits. All of these are regarded as products which are genuinely new. So, based on two criteria, we have two sub approaches of defining innovations from a product oriented way of defining innovation. One is in terms of the changes a new product brings about in the behavioral pattern or in the consumption and usage patterns of consumers. So, we classify them as continuous innovations, dynamically continuous innovations and discontinuous innovations. And secondly is in terms of changes brought about in the product form, features, which means better benefits, more satisfaction to the customer, and that is how we, and as per this criteria we can classify them into three, which is artificially new, marginally new and genuinely new. Now, let us come to the third approach of discussing innovations, which is a market oriented approach. So, when we talk about the third approach, which is a market oriented approach, it defines innovations purely from the marketer's perspective. A product is regarded as a new product depending upon how much exposure the consumers have had about the product, how much they have seen the product, how much they are aware of the product, and the total sales penetration that has occurred in a specified period of time. So, depending upon consumer awareness, depending upon consumer purchase, depending upon the penetration as the sales and the penetration of a particular product or service offering in a specified period of time, we determine whether the product is a new product or it's a it's not a new product, or whether it is a innovative offering or not. So, this is in terms of the market oriented definition, where the newness is judged in terms of consumer awareness, first consumer exposure plus consumer awareness and penetration or into the market. So, the product is regarded as new as long as people do not have much exposure of it. It is regarded as new if people are not much aware of it. If it is regarded as new if the penetration has been has begun but is not has not picked up. So, as long as a product is just aware, people are aware of it, slightly aware of it, as far as they have had just very little exposure and as far as there has been very little penetration, we will term it as an innovation. The moment sales pick up, the moment awareness is enhanced, then we will no longer consider it as an innovation. So, a product is regarded as new if the market does not have too much of awareness of it, if the market does not have too much of exposure of it, and if the sales are low or if penetration is very low. So, as long as an innovative product is, people are not exposed to it, it is regarded as no. So, it is new if the market does not have much exposure of it and if the sales penetration is low. So, Here again there can be two bases of defining the market oriented definition. A product or service is regarded as new if it has been in the market for a short period of time, and it is also regarded as new if it has been bought by a very small portion or very small percentage of the potential market. So we use two criteria to define the innovativeness. One is people are, the product has been in the market for a very short period of time. Two, very few people are aware or have exposure about it, and the sales, the people who have bought it, or people who have bought it are a very small portion of the potential market. So this is how we define innovation from a market point of view, or from a market oriented definition. Finally, we come to a consumer oriented definition of defining innovation. It's a very favored approach. It's a much preferred approach over other approaches of defining innovation. So when we compare the firm oriented, the product oriented, the market oriented, and the customer oriented definition, the customer oriented definition is a more preferred orientation, or a more preferred perspective of defining an innovation. So the reason is that here the concept of newness or the concept of innovation is left entirely on the customer. The focus here is the customer and his reaction towards the product or service offering in terms of acceptance of the product or rejection of the product. So when we speak about innovation, when we speak about diffusion of innovation, or when we speak about the adoption process, this is what is relevant for a marketer, that how does the customer react? Does he accept it or does he reject it? So this is why this particular approach, which tries to assess innovations in terms of consumer acceptance and rejection of a product or service offering, is more relevant on a more favored approach over other approaches. So a product is regarded as new, innovation is a product is regarded as innovative insofar as the consumer thinks it to be. So as long as the consumer feels it's a new product, the product is an innovative product. It is purely based on the consumer's perception about the newness of the product. It ignores the technological aspects, it ignores the behavioral changes, but it just says that as long as consumers perceive a particular product or service offering to be innovative, it is a product or service offering. It is a new product or service offering. So it's an innovation. So if we look at this, we basically see that we have the firm oriented view, we have the product oriented view, we have the market oriented view, and we have the customer oriented view. And out of all of these, it is the customer oriented point of view which has the maximum relevance. Now let us come to the various dimensions of innovation. When we have just discussed that some of the innovations may be very slight modifications over existing ones, others may be little radically different, and there will be others which will be totally different. So there could be slight changes or some radical changes or totally new products that are brought about, and whether a change is slight, radical or complete, it lies on a continuum. Now the definition here of innovation and its relationship to this continuum as slight, radical or absolutely new is classified on the basis of two dimensions, the technological dimension and the behavioral dimension. So which means, one, the technological change that the product embodies, and two, the behavioral change that it requires to be brought about in the consumers with respect to the usage patterns and with respect to the consumption patterns. So there are two things which we discussed: the technological changes related to the product and the behavioral changes within consumers with respect to their usage and consumption patterns. So these two things are of relevance here, and we will study innovation on the basis of these two dimensions. Now when we talk of this, we further talk of it in terms of technological changes which are just related to the product, behavioral changes which relate to consumer issues, consumer behavior issues, be it product adoption or be it usage. And some products here, if we talk of, are illustrative of one only. That means they are just illustrative of technological changes. Some are illustrative of only behavioral changes, and some embody both technological and behavioral changes. So let us see, products like a change from VCDs to DVDs was illustrative of better technology, better picture quality, better sound effects and better visuals. So it involved no behavioral changes at all. There was just a technological change with the construction of the product. So here the new product on a dimension is new only because of technological changes that have been brought about. There have been no other changes. So, such a product which is from a VCD to a DVD embodies only technological changes. There are other kinds of innovations which embody only behavioral changes. For example, the introduction of two-wheelers for women. Okay, the technology is the same, the two-wheeler is the same, the machinery is the same, but it has, because it is designed for women, it has been positioned as a product for women. There has been a behavioral change where women have are preferring it over a bicycle, or even finding it easier in terms of traffic. When they see a four-wheeler, they find a two-wheeler always easier to manage in the traffic. So, it brings about a change in the behavioral patterns. Essentially, there is no technological change with respect to the two-wheeler, but they have encouraged women to use scooters, to use two-wheelers, and that is how the product has brought about a change in the usage and consumption patterns of women. It has brought about a change in the behavioral patterns of women. Now, the other changes which embody both technological changes and behavioral changes, for example, the cell phones with GPRS and 3G, etc. Not only have they illustrated changes in technology, but they have also brought about considerable behavioral change. People can make calls, they can access their emails, they can browse over the internet from anywhere and everywhere. So, such a change has brought about a technological change, where there is an advancement in technology, but has also brought about a behavioral change within consumers with respect to the usage and consumption patterns. So, that is how we speak of innovations either on a dimensions, either as bringing about a change, a technological change in the product itself, or behavioral change in the consumers, or both, bringing about a change in technology as well as in the behavioral or usage and consumption patterns. Now, let us come to the classification of new product innovations. The most commonly used classification is the one which has been proposed by Thomas Robertson, and based on the two dimensions which we have just discussed, the technological dimension related to the product and the behavioral dimension related to the consumer, Robertson has defined innovations into three categories. One, continuous innovations; two, dynamically continuous innovations; and three, the discontinuous innovations. We have just discussed these definitions or these classifications when we were discussing the product oriented definition of innovation, but we will still go a little beyond here and see how Robertson has elaborated upon them, and how he has discussed the continuous innovation, dynamically continuous innovation, and discontinuous innovation. So, a continuous innovation, as we said, is a modification over an existing product. There is little technological change, but no behavioral change on the part of the consumer with respect to usage or consumption or related experiences. The technology used to manufacture the product is not different from the one with the product the original, but still there is some change, and with respect to behavior there is no change at all. So, the consumer does not have to adopt a new purchase pattern. All of the line extensions are a part, or different kinds of variants, product variants in form of color, in form of shape, in form of size are examples of continuous innovation. So, various forms of Amul chocolates or various forms of Amul ice creams are line extensions of Amul chocolate or Amul ice cream. So, if a flavor is launched of an ice cream and then shortly there is another flavor which gets launched, it's an example of a continuous innovation. There is a change in the process of manufacture, slight change in the ingredients, but there is no change in the behavioral pattern or the usage patterns in consumers. Other examples could be the laser jet replacing the earlier one laser jet replacing an earlier version of a laser jet. So, hardly there is some change in technology, but no change in behavioral patterns. A change in from the VCDs to the DVDs, which brings about a change in the the product or the technology, but no change in the behavioral patterns. So, this is what we mean by continuous innovations. The second is what Robertson called was dynamically continuous innovation. It includes some change in the product, it includes some kind of change in the technology, but it includes no behavioral change at all. While in continuous innovation technology was slightly changed, product was slightly changed, here the change in technology is much higher, it is much larger. So, So there is while in continuous innovation there was a slight change in technology, but in case of dynamically continuous innovation, the technological changes are a little more. The product is technologically superior or much better, but again there are no behavioral changes brought about. So the technological change which is brought about is either to increase efficiency or to reduce cost or to bring greater value for the customer. Example is like the Walkman giving way to the portable CD player, or the semi-automatic washing machine giving way to the fully automatic washing machine. So here we see a change in technology from a twin tub semi-automatic machine, you move to a single tub fully automatic washing machine, and there is a change, but behaviorally there is not much of a change which occurs. Clothes are still washed and clothes are still dried. So this is what we mean by dynamically continuous, where there is a change in technology but not much of a change in the behavioral. But in case of discontinuous innovations, not only will there be a technological change, but there will also be a much behavioral change. They are more radical, they are truly innovative in the sense that technologically they are superior, plus they will bring about a considerable change in behavioral patterns amongst consumers with respect to the usage and consumption of such products and services. So technology used to manufacture is also going to be different, and the manner in which the consumer will purchase them, use them will also be very different. So the telephone giving way to the mobile, or the the 3G and the GPRS where they provide email access or internet access and so forth. So they are all examples of discontinuous innovation. Now let us come to what we mean by the definition and meaning of diffusion of innovation and adoption. So we will be talking about one, diffusion of innovation, and two, adoption. Now these two things are very relevant for a marketer, broadly because diffusion will tell us how a particular new product offering will be reacted upon by the consumer. That means, will the consumer accept it or reject it, or if he accepts it, what is going to be the trend. So that will be in how quickly or how does it get diffused, how does it get spread into the market system or into the social system. On the other hand, adoption will talk of the various stages which consumers will go through as the process happens. So both the processes are equally important to us, and a marketer basically needs to address both these issues, both diffusion of innovation as well as adoption, when he is thinking of launching new product and service offerings. So one is whether the new product or service offering, whether the modified product or service offering will be accepted, and two is how quickly will they accept it. So these two issues will come under the purview of what we call as a diffusion of innovation. Now, when we define diffusion, or when we say it's a macro process which deals with the spread of a new product or service offering amongst the potential market. So it basically talks of the acceptance or rejection of innovation by a consumer segment. So what is going to be the consumer reaction? How is the new product or service offering going to get spread amongst the potential market? So it deals with the spread of the new product or service offering in the market, and it relates to the acceptance or rejection by the consumer segment. Now, adoption is a micro concept. It lays emphasis on the various stages or various phases through which an individual customer will pass while he accepts or he rejects a product or service offering. So when we talk of diffusion, it's a macro process, much larger, much broader in scope, which talks about how will the new product or service get diffused, how will it spread into the social system, how will it get spread into the consumer segments or in the market. And adoption will be in terms of what will be the different stages or the phases through which a consumer will pass before he decides to either accept a product or reject a new product or service offering. Now let us first talk of diffusion of a process, and then we will subsequently discuss the adoption process. Now let us move, what is the diffusion process? So it deals with basically the spread of the new product or service offering amongst the potential market, except it basically talks about acceptance and rejection of a new product. Now it is a process by which an innovation gets spread or absorbed or accepted or assimilated by consumer markets or by consumer segments. It is a process by which an innovation spreads amongst and gets absorbed or gets accepted or gets assimilated in the marketplace. So that is what we refer to as diffusion process. Now there was a person here we have Schiffman. Schiffman basically defines it as the process by which the acceptance of an innovation in terms of a new product or a new service or a new idea or a new practice is spread by communication, either mass media or salespeople or informal communication, to the members of a social system or the target market over a period of time. So if you see this definition, it's a process by which the acceptance of an innovation is spread by communication into a social system over a period of time. So there are 4 basic elements of the diffusion process: the innovation itself, the channels of communication through which people will come to know about the innovative product, the social system into which it has to spread, the consumer segments, and the time. I mean, there will be always a specified time limit within which this has to happen. So let us discuss each of these 4 elements subsequently. When we talk of an innovation, it refers to the newness of a product or service offering. The channel of communication here refers to 2 kinds of communication: the marketing communication and the interpersonal communication. We have discussed both in our previous sessions. Marketing communication takes place between the marketer and the customer, or between the marketer and the potential segment, or the marketer and his target segment. And it could be either personal, face to face as a salesman and or a manufacturer or a marketer and the consumer, or it could be impersonal via a media, broadcast media, or a print media, or an audiovisual media. Okay, so this is what we mean by marketing communication. And we also have interpersonal communication, which takes place between consumers themselves, or between the actual consumer and a prospect, or between members of the target segment. So we have discussed how it takes form in the form of a informal interpersonal communication that takes place as word of mouth between consumers segments, or between consumers themselves, or through an opinion leader. So we have a new product or service offering, information about which is transmitted either as marketing communication or as interpersonal communication. Marketing communication which will happen either personally or impersonally, and informal interpersonal communication which happens through word of mouth. The third element which we discuss here is the social system. The social system here is the social setting in which the diffusion takes place. It actually refers to the market segment or the target segment. So it is basically the target segment for which the product is designed. It's here, the social system here means the target market or the target segment for whom that particular product is meant for, or the innovative product is meant for. So if it's a new anti-wrinkle herbal cream, people in their 40s, women in their 40s will actually be a social system for such kind of products. Now the social system is important for a marketer because of 2 reasons. The new product or service offering is discussed and evaluated within members of a social system, and they share their thoughts and views through interpersonal communication, through opinion leadership, and through word of mouth. Second, the philosophy and the resultant orientation with respect to culture, customs, traditions, values and norms will also affect the diffusion process. So because of this, because one, the norms, social cultural norms which are set up in a social system, 2, the informal communication that takes place in a social system, both of these will have an impact on the diffusion process, on the spread of this new product or service offering into the market. So the social system basically has an impact on the adoption and the assimilation of the innovative offering. In order to be accepted quickly, in order to penetrate into the market quickly, the marketer has to basically keep the needs of the social system in mind, and he has to design his product or service offering accordingly. He has to keep in mind the social system, the target system, or the target market or the social system in mind, and design his offering accordingly. So the social system here is of relevance. The fourth element of this definition is time. Time here will determine the pace of adoption, or the pace of the adoption process or the assimilation process with respect to the new product or service offering. So time here refers to 2 things: the amount of time, and 2, the rate of adoption and the identification of adopter categories. So time here refers to or determines the pace of adoption and the resultant assimilation. And 2 things that we need to discuss with respect to time is the amount of purchase time and the rate of adoption and the identification of adopter categories. So let us first talk of the amount of purchase time. The amount of purchase time basically speaks about the average time that a consumer will take to adopt a product or service offering. Okay, so what will be the average time span which a person will take from his initial awareness to his final acceptance or rejection with respect to a new product or service? Okay, so it will basically help assess the total time that will be taken for a new product or service offering or for an innovation to be spread into the social system, to be diffused, to be adopted by the people at large. When the average time is less, when the average purchase time is less, it is an indication that the diffusion process will be much faster, the adoption will be much quicker and much faster, the assimilation will be much faster. So, the amount of purchase time here means what is the time difference or what is the time period which from initial awareness of a product or service offering to the the final acceptance or rejection by a consumer. The second thing which we need to discuss is the rate of adoption and the identification of adopter categories. So, the rate of adoption here refers to the period that will be taken for a new product or service to be accepted by the target segment. How long will it take for market to accept a new product or service offering? How long does it take for a new product or service offering to be accepted by people in the target segments? So, the rate of adoption today is getting much faster, it is getting much quicker thanks to changes brought about in the social, cultural, political, technological environment, and thanks to globalization, thanks to the internet, thanks to the role played by mass media, and the world getting smaller and smaller with respect to the kind of communication that is happening. It's much faster. So, the rate of adoption is getting much quicker, much faster, and the marketer also aims at having a rapid acceptance so that he can get a maximum advantage as a first mover. The second thing which we discuss is in terms of adopter categories. Now, it refers to a classification scheme amongst members of a target system which illustrates where one consumer stands with respect to another, with respect to the time lapsed in terms of introduction of a new product and its adoption. So, there will be some consumers who will very quickly go in and adopt a new product. There will be some consumers or some people who will take a lot of time to actually finally purchase a particular product which has been in the market for a long time. So, depending upon where a consumer stands in relation to another consumer with respect to time that has lapsed between the introduction of the new product and the final adoption, we can classify consumers as adopters and as non-adopters, and within adopters also we can have a category of adopters. So, we will talk about these adopter categories. What we mean here is that we take time on one hand, we take consumers and we classify consumers with respect to how much time they take with respect to their initial awareness to their final purchase process. So, person X may take 2 days, person Y may take 2 years. So, we can't put them at an equal standing. We have to put them on a continuum, we have to put them into a classification or into a category where we see how quickly does one person buy and how late or how another person delays the entire process. So, in respect to time, that has lapsed between the introduction of a new product and its final adoption, we can classify consumers. Researchers have classified them into adopter and non-adopter categories, and we can range them into 3 categories or 5 categories. Now, there is a person here very famous, very successful as a researcher in innovations or in the field of innovation, and Rogers. So, Rogers has proposed a classification of adopters according to which consumers can be divided into 5 categories based on the time that they take to buy a particular product or service offering after it comes, after it's introduced into the market. So, as and when a product is introduced into the market and the time taken by people to purchase it, we can classify them in such consumers into 5 categories, and the 5 adopter categories are innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. So, if we take this classification and it is through research done by Roger, he classified these consumers into 5 categories and placed them in the form of plotted them in the form of a graph, and it leads to such a kind of a bell-shaped curve which we get, where we find innovators comprise 2.5% of the target segment. They are the persons who are the first to go out and buy a particular product. So, they buy such new product and service offerings not because of a need, but because they desire new product and service offerings. They want to try such things out. They seek by nature, by their own personal traits, they want to try out new things, they want to buy out new things, and they seek new product and service offerings. So, they are high on self-confidence. They are always eager to try out new product and service offerings. There are two drivers to such innovators. One, they have an interest and an inclination to buy, and two, they have the purchasing power and the access. So this first 2.5% of those who buy this product or service offering as soon as it is launched are referred to as innovators. The first to buy, first to try out, why? Because they have an inclination to try out new product and service offerings. They also have the purchasing power, access and income, and so they go and buy. But here we have to mention very specifically that innovators are not generic. They are specific to a particular product category. So they will go in and buy such kinds of products and services with which they have a level of interest, or they are involved in such product or service category. So they will be innovative for a particular product or service category, and they will not be a generic whole. So innovators are category specific, they are not generic. The second the second category is what we refer to as the early adopters, which will be the next 13.5% of adopters. So they are consumers who purchase the new product and service offering not because they are fascinated by something new, but because they need it. They originally tend to have some idea on the product or service offering, and after gathering some information about the product or brand, they go in for the purchase. They also rely on group norms, and they turn out to be good opinion leaders and could be easy targets for a marketer. So this is what we mean by an early adopter. Then we have the next category, which is the next 34%, which we call the early majority. They are similar to early adopter in the sense that they buy the product because they possess a need and they want to fulfill it. However, they are not as quick as members in the early adopters are. So they are a little slow. And why? Because unlike the first two categories, the third category, which is the early majority, do not possess much level of interest in that product or service category. It is just out of sheer need that they are going and buying it. So they fall into this category, and they collect information, they evaluate information, they are very careful, they make strong deliberations, and then finally take a decision, and so the process takes much longer, and they make 34% of the adopters. The next category of the adopters is what is another 34%, which we call as the late majority. They are referred late because by the time they buy this product or service offering, most of the members of their social class have bought it. Okay, so the members of the social class, their reference group or their peers, have already made such a purchase, and now these people, these late majority, are going to buy it for two reasons. One, they seek social acceptance, they seek social approval, so they also want to buy such products which other members in the social class have already bought. Two, they also want to buy out because now they feel they can be sure about this new product or service offering. So they have gained some more confidence because others in their social group or in their reference group have bought it. So they have themselves evaluated the product or service offering, and now these people are ready to buy. So they also have a need, and they go in for a lot of deliberation and thought, but again driven by social pressure and social peer pressure, they buy the purchase. So by nature they are skeptical, and they would conform to social norms, social pressure. Interpersonal communication has a big role to play. And finally, the last category of adopters is what we call the laggards, who make up the 16% of the target segment. They are slow in buying because of few reasons. One, they are uninvolved with the product or service category. Two, they don't possess much of information. They are uninfluenced by social pressure. They don't get carried away by peer pressure, or they do not have much concern for social acceptance and social affiliation. And they believe in making routine purchases and going with the familiar, going with the known rather than with something which is unfamiliar and unknown. So these are the 5 adopter categories which we have. Now Roger's classification, this particular classification which was proposed by Roger, only includes the adopter categories, but there are also people in the market who do not venture out into seeking a product or service category at all. They do not go out and venture into buying this new product or service at all. So what do we call such people? We call such people as non-adopters. They do not buy the product or service, the new product which has been introduced at all. They never buy it. Okay, they do not venture out into seeking out a new brand or product or a new brand, as it does not conform to their social norms or to their cultural norms or to their socioeconomic class, and they have never used such a product. So, such people are called non-adopters. They never adopt a new product or service offering, and in general they are a very small portion of the entire market or of the entire population. So, we non-adopters can also be classified into 5 categories. We call them as unaware group, the symbolic rejectors, the symbolic adopters, the trial adopters, and the trial rejectors. So, unaware is those who are unaware about a product or service offering. The symbolic rejectors are those who are aware, but they feel that the product is not for them because it does not meet their needs or does not conform to their social class or their socioeconomic class or their reference group or their socioeconomic cultural values and norms. The symbolic adopters are those who are aware of the innovative offering. They believe that the product or service may be relevant for them, but they have yet not tried it. So, we call them symbolic adopters. Trial adopters are those who have tried the innovative offering and they have not yet made a purchase. So, they have tried the product, but not yet bought it, and they have yet to made a repurchase to confirm liking or habit formation. And then there are trial rejectors, and these trial rejectors are those who are non-adopters, who have tried the new product and they have not found it to be suitable, and then and they feel they have no intention to buy it in future. So, the unawares are those who are not aware at all. Symbolic rejectors have rejected the brand because it does not conform to their socioeconomic cultural values. Symbolic adopters are those who understand the brand, want to buy it, but they are yet to try it out. They feel it could be relevant to them, but they yet to try it out. Trial adopters are those who have tried it but yet to repurchase or form a habit out of buying them, and trial rejectors are those which have formed it and are decided to reject it. Now we come to what we call as the adoption process. Adoption is a micro process which basically lays emphasis on the various stages through which a consumer passes while making a decision whether to accept or reject a new product. So, it basically gives emphasis on the various stages through which consumers pass from initial awareness to final acceptance or rejection. Now, Schiffman has defined these stages as has defined adoption as the stages through which a consumer passes while arriving at a decision to try out a product or not to try out a product, or to try or not to try, or not to continue using or discontinuing using a product. So, he says the stages through which an individual passes while arriving at a decision to try or not to try, or to continue or continue using a new product. Now, consumer researchers have proposed a large number of models to define the adoption process. We have the hierarchy of effects model, we have Robertson's model, and we have Rogers' model. Each of these models basically defines the stages through which a prospect passes as he ends up being a consumer. So, these are the stages through which a prospect is going to move and end up leading up to being a consumer, right from the stage of initial awareness to the stage of final adoption. So, Schiffman says the stages through which an individual consumer passes while arriving at a decision to try or not to try, or to continue using or to discontinue using a new product. Now, when we are talking of these different stages through which a consumer is going to pass, right from his being a prospect to his being a consumer, right from his initial awareness about the product, about the new product, to his final adoption of the new product. We will discuss a few of these models. We have the hierarchy of effects model, which starts with awareness, which leads to knowledge. So, liking, preference, conviction, and adoption. So, in awareness, it is initial awareness on the part of the consumer, which leads to knowledge, where the consumer gets to know about the product or service offering, his attributes, features. The liking, where he develops a feeling of like and dislike. The preference, where the feeling of like and dislike gets deeper into a preference for buying or not buying a product, the new product. Conviction, where the consumer develops confidence and decides to buy, and adoption, when he finally goes out and purchases it. Another model is Robertson's model, where it starts with problem recognition, where a consumer realizes there is a need, moves to awareness, he becomes aware of a product or service offering. Comprehension, where he gathers information about a new product or service offering, about the various brands, he comprehends this information and develops an understanding. In attitudes, based on his comprehension, he develops a feeling of like or dislike, favorableness or unfavorableness. Then it leads to legitimization, where the liking or the favorableness or dislike or unfavorableness leads to is confirmed with facts and logic as well as with social influence. Then he goes in for trial. He goes in for adoption, where he has evaluated his experience with the product or service offering through trial, and finally goes and buys the product. And dissonance, where he faces a dilemma whether he has made the right choice. Finally, we have Rogers' model, where he speaks about knowledge about innovative product or service offering, the persuasion, which is the feeling towards innovation, which depends upon the perceived characteristics of the innovation in terms of relative advantage, compatibility, complexibility, trialability and observability. Then his decision, which is based on his attitude, he mentally decides to adopt or reject the product or service offering. Implementation, where the consumer implements his decision, which involves trial and use. And confirmation, where he moves from trial, which means no commitment or to purchase or repurchase. He moves from this stage of trial to a final stage of adoption, where he decides to buy, to patronize, to use a particular product or service offering, and he, at this stage, of course, he may seek some kind of a reinforcement or reassurance. Now, this brings us to the end of this particular session. These are the references for further reading. Loudon and Della Bitta, Consumer Behavior, 4th edition, Tata McGraw-Hill. Peter and Olson, Consumer Behavior and Marketing Strategy, McGraw-Hill. Schiffman and Kanu, Consumer Behavior, 8th edition, 2004, Prentice Hall. And Wells and Prensky, Consumer Behavior, John Wiley and Son, 1996. The frequently asked questions. Question 1, explain the varying perspective to defining innovation. Question 2, write a note on the classification of new product innovations, also give examples. Question number 3, explain what you mean by the adopter categories. And question number 4, explain the various stages in the adoption process. Now, coming to a quiz. Section A, true, false. 1, line extensions are continuous innovations. Is it a true or a false statement? This is a true statement. 2, innovators comprise 13.5% of the target market adopters. True or false? This is a false statement. They do not comprise 13.5%. They just comprise about 2.5%. 3, innovators are generic. They are not specific to a product or service type. This is a false statement. Innovators are not generic. They are specific to a product or service type. Fill in the blanks. 1, as per the dash approach, a product or service offering is regarded as new if the company starts manufacturing or marketing it for the first time. The answer is firm. 2, as per the product-oriented approach, innovations can be classified into 3 categories: continuous innovations, dash innovations and dash innovations. So, it is dynamically continuous innovations and discontinuous innovations. 3, amidst the varying perspective and orientation, the approach that receives wide attention are the dash and the consumer-oriented approaches to studying innovation. So, the answer is the market and the consumer-oriented definitions of studying innovation. 4, generally speaking, the consumer passes through 5 stages of adoption: awareness, dash, trial and adoption. So, the answer is awareness, interest, evaluation, adoption, trial and adoption. So, the answer is awareness, interest, evaluation, trial and adoption. C, multiple choice questions. 1, which of the following statements is false? In discontinuous innovation, there is change not only in the technology but also in the behavioral patterns of usage and consumption. B, continuous innovations do not disrupt established usage and behavioral patterns. C, line extensions are discontinuous innovations. And D, all of the above. The answer is C. C is a false statement. Line extensions are discontinuous innovations. This is an incorrect statement. 2, Rogers has proposed a classification of adopters. The 5 adopter categories as per sequence are innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority and laggards. Innovators, early majority, early adopters, late majority and laggards. Innovators, early majority, late majority, early adopters and laggards. D, none of the above. The answer is A, which is innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority and laggards. The answer is A. Finally, which of the following is not a stage in Rogers' model of adoption? A, knowledge, B, persuasion, C, liking, D, confirmation. So, the answer is C, liking. Short questions. 1, define the following: dynamically continuous innovation and diffusion of innovation. 2, the term innovation has been described with varying perspectives and orientation. Mention any 3 orientations. 3, innovations are measured on 2 dimensions. Name them. 4, Robertson has classified the new products and innovations into 3 categories. Name them. 5, give an example of discontinuous innovation. 6, consumer researchers have proposed a number of models to describe the steps in the adoption process. Mention any 2. This brings us to conclusion of this session on diffusion of innovation. We will continue with our discussion on diffusion of innovation in the subsequent session. Thank you.